present to you now Jason John.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is an honor to speak before all of you today. This is really timely for me because this is an opportunity to take the things that I've been learning with Reverend Trish and actually have to go out and apply it, right? You have to go out and do a little bit of learning, put together some research so that you can do a talk, right? So this has been really timely for me, so I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. So, miracles do happen. I'd like to share with you what I've learned. I'd like to start off by talking about a miracle. And that miracle involves two men who were in a really, really bad car crash. One was a rabbi and one was a priest. When the rabbi got out of his vehicle, he noticed that his vehicle was completely damaged, totally irreparable. Also, the priest gets out of his vehicle's in the same condition. When the rabbi sees the priest, he says, "Oh my God, can you believe this? I'm a rabbi, you're a priest. Our vehicles are completely decimated, but we're perfectly fine. There's no one else hurt. This is a miracle." I believe that God wanted us to meet today. He wanted us to become friends and live together in peace. And so the priest says, "Yes, I believe that as well. It is truly a blessing." And here's another blessing. I just came back from Trader Joe's and I noticed the wine that I picked up for my parish, that all of the bottles are unbroken. So the priest picks up one of the bottles of wine and he says, "I believe that because of this miracle, God wants us to drink this bottle of wine and celebrate." So the priest takes the cap off and he hands it to the rabbi. Rabbi, still visibly shaken by the accident, he goes ahead and he drinks half the bottle. Hands it back to the priest. The priest says, "Yeah, it's a good wine." And then he puts the cap back on. The rabbi's like, "Aren't you going to have any?" He said, "Absolutely. As soon as the police finish their sobriety exam." I thought I'd start off with a little bit of a joke. A little bit of a pointed joke too, right? But it was a miracle. So in this short talk, in this short conversation with you, I'm going to cover about 4 different areas. We're going to talk about what are miracles, how do we normally seek miracles in our lives, how do most people go about doing it, based on what I've observed. Also, why do some people seem to always get their prayers answered? There are some people out there and they seem so lucky, they're always blessed. And then also, how can we experience more miracles in our lives? So those are the 4 points we'll cover in this conversation. So when I start any type of project off, where I'm studying something and really diving in, I like to look at the definition first. And so the definition of the word miracle, a surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of divine agency. But I think all of us here know that in actuality, it is natural law. And we can reproduce it scientifically. We can make miracles in our lives. I think some of us know that already. But exactly what is a miracle? I like to think of a miracle as a religious word or the religious version of the word magic. And magic is really just a science that we don't understand yet. According to Star Trek. So there's a great story about this science, about what some people would call magic or something miraculous. And this story comes from the Bible. And I'd like to use Matthew 9:27-31 to illustrate this, where there was a healing of 2 blind men. And these 2 blind men, they heard about this guy, this master metaphysician named Jesus, who had healed a little girl and brought her back from the dead. And these guys were excited because both of them were blind. And they hadn't been able to see in a very long time. They wanted to see again. And they heard about all the other miraculous things that this man Jesus had done. So they got some help seeking Jesus, and they were able to get an audience with Jesus. And when they got an audience with him, they said, "Hey, we really want to see again. We know that you can help us to accomplish that." so that we can be healed. Jesus said, really? You think I can heal your blindness? They said, absolutely. You're raising children from the dead and whatnot. Absolutely. You can help us. He says, okay, close your eyes. He puts his hands on their heads. He prays over them. And then he tells them, by your simple faith, you are healed. Open your eyes. You can see. They open their eyes, and of course they can see. They got up. They rejoiced. It's a miracle. I haven't been able to see in 20 years, in 15 years. Now I can see. It's a miracle. Now Jesus, he understood the science of mind. And for him, this was no more effort for him than it is for us to breathe. It became a part of who he was. So his entire life was a prayer. So when he prayed into the mind of God for someone else, he prayed with expectancy. So to him, it wasn't a miracle. He knew that this was going to be the outcome. And over time, as people began to talk about the miracles of Jesus, particularly when he left from among us and made his transition, they began to think of him as being God. But Jesus teaches within the gospel that that he was just a manifestation of God, just as you and I are. Now, in this short talk, I'm going to use the life of Jesus a lot because he has a really good resume when it comes to miracles, if you haven't heard. He has raised people from the dead. He makes the blind see, feeding 5,000 people with 2 fish and 3 loaves of bread. My mother would have loved him when I was a teenager. Walking on water, turning water into wine, raising himself from the dead. Pretty impressive. Now, of course, these stories are mostly allegorical, but they represent the latent power of God stored in each and every one of us. And so he goes on to talk about this power that's in us, starting in John 14, 12 through 14, where he says, "Verily I say unto you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. So you may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it." Okay. So he's telling us here that we have a power. He's going to carry the message to God for us. Is that what he's saying? You see, Jesus understood that the people who were following him at the time, that sometimes they were weak of faith. Maybe some of you know the story of Peter and some of his trials. Sometimes they're weak of faith. Sometimes we get a little weak of faith. Sometimes we forget the things that have helped us, that we have learned on our path. And because they've been weak of faith, sometimes they need a crutch, something to help hold them or support their faith. And that's why he said, "Ask in my name." That's what he told his followers to do. Because he knew that if his followers used his name, that they would remember the miracles that he did. And by remembering those miracles, they would then expect their prayers to be answered. And over time, they would become accustomed to their prayers being answered. And if you become accustomed to something, you expect it to happen over and over and over again. You get into your car, you turn it on. It starts up each and every time, and you're surprised when it doesn't. You're supposed to be surprised when it doesn't, right? You put your key into your door at home and you turn it, you expect that lock to open. And as you become, or as they became accustomed to their prayers being answered, they were eventually able to stand on their own and bring or call things into existence. Our practitioner, Frank, was describing the role of the practitioner. What is the practitioner doing? What did he describe to us? He said, or rather the scripture said, going to the Father and doing whatever you ask. That's exactly what the practitioner is doing. Praying into the mind of God, helping to support you so that you can lean on that individual who's praying with you, your prayer partner. And through that process, helping you become stronger in your faith so you can stand on your own. And we all need it from time to time. I've certainly written some prayers and put in that basket. So we've always had this power, and it mentions in the scripture, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. Now, when Jesus said that, he wasn't talking about himself, because he would have said, so that the Father may be glorified in me. We've all taken English class, right? I don't think Jesus was talking in the third person. He wasn't like some cool Hollywood dude, right? Talking in the third person like Jesus does this, right? No. He was talking about us. Where it says, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. That Son is you and I, the S-U-N, right? Instead of the S-O-N, because God's light shines through us. When blessings come into our life, or blessings come into the world, good things happen in the world, it comes through the agency of a human being. We're where God's light comes from. So I decided to dive a little bit deeper into exactly what miracles are. And I do this because I have a very particular way of studying. I want to see where a word comes from. I want to see the etymology of that word. And so the origin of the word miracle, one of those origins is in Sanskrit. The word smira, which means smiling. In Greek, the word medan, which means to smile. And in another language I've never heard of before, until my research, it was called Old Church Slavonic. The word is called smiho, which means to laugh. And I thought about that for a moment. That is really interesting. The basis or the root for the word miracle are emotions. Laughing and smiling is the basis for the word miracle. So that seems to mean that the root of creating miracles in your life are your positive emotions and feelings backed by your belief. We believe it's going to happen. We back it with our positive emotions and we bring it into reality. We've all possibly had that experience in our lives. And we want to recreate that, don't we? So the question for all of us, for myself, all of us, why do we sometimes approach our prayer with hope instead of with certainty? Why do we do that to ourselves? I have a few ideas I'd like to share with you. Maybe because of how our needs were met in our formative years. So when we were a baby, when you were a baby, presumably, you remember, maybe you don't. I'm sure you don't. How were your needs met? You wanted to be trained, what did you do? Cry. You cried. When you wanted to be held, what did you do? Cry. Right. When you wanted to be fed, what did you do? Cry. Right. That's the only language you had. You used that language to express what you wanted, and this magical being appeared, and they gave you a bottle. Now, a little bit later in life, when you're about 7 or 8, you're walking down the aisle of the grocery store with your parent or your caregiver, and you want that box of sugary cereal. What did you do to get that box of sugary cereal? Anyone? You grab it. You would nag the daylights out of your parent, right? That's what you did. That's what we've done. So at that level, we had a different level of sophistication in order to communicate with the higher being in our life, our parent, to bring something into reality for us. Now, a little bit later on, as teenagers, what did we do when we wanted something? Some of you are trying to still forget, right?
Sneak out of the house.
There you go, sneak out of the house, just go do it, right?
Do it anyway.
Do it anyway. When I was a teenager, I lived in Nevada. And in Nevada, you can, at that time, I don't know now, but at that time, you were able to get a driver's license when you're 15 and a half. And so I turned 15 in May. And so in November, I'd be eligible for a learner's permit. And I really wanted to drive. You know, back in the day, that was a rite of passage for teenagers. And so I told my mother in in May, hey, I can get my driver's license in November. And then I said it to her again in June, then in July, and then in August, then in September, then in October. And when she got home from work on November 7th, I was standing in the driveway with my paperwork filled out in my hand. I had went and worked over the summer and saved up some money to help pay for the insurance and to pay all the fees at the DMV. And I'm standing in there in the driveway. She pulls up. She thinks something's wrong. What's going on? Why are you standing here? Oh, to go to the DMV. Today is November 7th. Let's go. She just got home from work. I didn't give the woman a minute to breathe. She says, okay, let's just go on Saturday. No. We've been talking about this for months. I was talking about it for months. I'm bargaining with her, right? And so, of course, I did allow her to go in and use the restroom. thought that was the best thing to do because I did try to talk her into waiting until we got to the D&B. That didn't work. Being a teenager, right? So anyway, so I was blessed to be able to go get my license, but I bargained with her. I begged and browbeat to do that because that's where I was at my level of maturity at 15 and a half. So here's another question for us. As adults, have we supplanted our parents with God? Since we don't have our parents to go to anymore when we really, really want something, have we taken these same behaviors, sometimes as a teenager, as we did as a teenager, and tried to bargain with God? Have we sometimes did the 7 or 8-year-old thing and think that we can just annoy God into giving us what we want? Or do we just haven't done the baby thing? It's something to think about. The question that we want to ask ourselves, again, is why do we beg and plead instead of just believe? What's going on with our faith? So I transition to this. Let's look at people who seem to get their prayers answered. Let's study that for a second. Some of these people, you or I may look at and believe that they're undeserving. Sometimes you see people being blessed and you're like, really? Seriously? That jerk? Sometimes we believe that certain people who seem to be blessed are people who you might even consider to be evil. Your own value, your own judgment call. Let's look at that a little bit, and I'd like to use a story to illustrate how that affects us, how those thoughts affect us. And this story is going to come from Psalm 73 in the Psalm of Asaph. And I'm going to read it to you. It's short. Sorry I wasn't able to memorize it, but it's a really good psalm. So I'll read this to you very shortly. Surely God is good to Israel, meaning those who live in peace, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold, meaning that my faith was shaken. For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked, for they have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They are not plagued by human ills. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hearts come iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limit. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance, they threaten oppression. Now, I know we live in D.C., but any image in your mind that may have to do with any situation or political thing or whatever the case is, this was written thousands of years ago, so this is just human behavior, which I found interesting. Continuing. Their mouths claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. They say, how would God know? Does the Most High know anything? God, really? This guy gets blessed? This person gets blessed? Not me? This is what the wicked are like. They're always free of care. They go on amassing wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure. I have washed my hands of innocence. God, I don't do those things. I try to live right. All day long I have been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishments. If I had spoken out like that, I would have betrayed your children. When I tried to understand all this, it troubled me deeply until I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destiny. So what was Asaph doing throughout this verse? He was condemning someone else's blessings. So what happens when you condemn someone else's blessings?
Condemn your own.
That's right. You condemn your own. You block your own blessings. He was passing judgment on the worthiness of the ones receiving the blessings. What does that do to you when you do that? When we do that? Same thing. We block our blessings. And he also was focusing on what he did not have, and thereby blocking his blessings, getting more of what he didn't want. But it wasn't until he went into the sanctuary of God, or entered the sanctuary of God, or went into the silence and contemplated, that he was able to understand what he was attracting into his life. You see, divine intelligence blesses us by providing all of us with the ability to shape our lives in any which way we want. It's a formless substance, as taught to us by Ernest Holmes. And so we can use that power like Mother Teresa, and we can become missionaries of peace. We can help the destitute. We can help people become healed. Or we can use that power and be like Adolf Hitler and become missionaries of destruction. Granted, there is some middle ground. Now, what's similar about both of these individuals, obviously at different ends of the spectrum? Well, both of these individuals had a large faith in themselves, and they were backed by their own powerful emotions. I don't speak German, but who has ever watched the History Channel and seen Adolf Hitler speak before? Okay? He was speaking with passion. You can sit there and watch the guy. Even knowing what he was talking about, even though you don't understand exactly what he's saying, you know it's not good. But he was a captivating speaker. He had emotions backed by his faith in what he was doing, even though generally we look at that as being evil. Now, both of these individuals, of course, had this large faith in themselves, and we see this power demonstrated every day in the political arena, among business leaders, as well as the military leaders. So, why do many of us, as either spiritual or religious people, why do we not always allow ourselves to use this power? Maybe it's because we believe we're being humble. We hide our light. Maybe it's because we're terrified of success and actually achieving the object of our desire. Maybe we're too focused on our troubles, just like Aesop. In the Science of Mind textbook, Ernest Holmes says, let us then go forward with belief that a greater power is working through us, that all law is a law of good, that we planted our seed of thought in the mind of the absolute, and that we can go our way rejoicing in divine privilege of working with the infinite. So how exactly do we work with the infinite and experience miracles in our life? I believe, based on some of the reading I've done, that it alludes to three areas: belief, faith, and self-suggestion. In the Science of Mind textbook, we commonly see that written as autosuggestion. Let's start with belief for a moment. Ernest Holmes shared with us that the first great necessity is to believe, and without belief, we can do nothing. And this is why Jesus said to the blind men, "It is done unto you even as you have believed." So our first step is to figure out in our lives, what do we want to move from hope to happen? What would we like to move from concept to concrete? Who has ever watched a really good movie before? Okay, all of us, great. Maybe Forrest Gump, maybe Star Wars, some movie that drew you in, that made you feel like the character, the main character in the movie, where you can actually feel their emotions. Your eyes were glued to the screen and you were just drawn into that mythical world. In the movie industry, this ability to get the audience to suspend reality is one of the hallmarks of a great film. So why not take this same technique and use it for ourselves? Why not create a vision or a short movie in our minds that help us suspend belief for a moment, not for an hour and a half, but maybe for 30 seconds, something that we can do every day to help us see the life that we truly want. Now, if we stop for a second, everyone, and let's just think about something that's top of mind for us, a situation that we want to overcome, a goal that we'd like to accomplish in life. Maybe it's a new job, and I want you to picture yourself, if it's something like that, and you see your name on the office door. Maybe you see yourself saying hi to your assistant as you walk into your private office. Or maybe it's a relationship and you see yourself doing something that you enjoy with someone else who enjoys the same thing. Maybe it's hiking. Maybe it's walking on the beach and you see yourself doing this. This just doesn't have to be a long movie, but it does have to be the opposite of the reality that you're experiencing now. I want you to take a moment in your minds, just for a few seconds. We're going to formulate our short movies. Let's just take a moment and see ourselves doing that thing or being in that new reality. Let's just take like 20 seconds, 20 to 30 seconds to do that. Okay. Do we all have our movie? Okay, we have our short little movie. So now let's take our movie, and just like they do in the film industry, let's move that to the next phase of the process, right? Because after they film it, they have to do some editing, right? So let's do a little bit of editing. The next ingredient I'd like to talk to you about is faith. According to a gentleman named, a Swiss alchemist and physician named Philippus Pericles, he said, whether the object of your faith be real or false, you will nevertheless obtain the same effects. Faith, however, produces miracles. And whether it is true or false faith, it always produces the same wonders. So I want us to take our mental movie again, and I want us to run it again. But this time when we run our mental movie, what I'd like for you to do is to identify what feelings are associated with those images that you have running in your mind in your short movie. Maybe if you're walking into your office where you've just been recently promoted, maybe you feel a sense of accomplishment. Maybe you feel a sense of mission, a sense of adventure is something new. If it's a relationship, maybe you feel security. Maybe you feel the warmness or the touch of someone else. I want us to take a few seconds and I want us to associate the feelings with those images. Let's just take a few seconds again. Let's slowly return our attention here. So every time we move forward and we play our mental movie and we concentrate on how the new situation feels, I want you to take heed that our feelings are one of the most important aspects of that step. Our feelings are the soundtrack to our movie. Just as when we're in the movie theater, the music a lot of times makes the movie. So our feelings are going to help take our movie that we have in our minds, and it's going to help us really develop a attachment, if you will, to that vision. And so that third step, self-suggestion, doing this over and over and over again. Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich in chapter 3 says, the dominating thoughts which one permits to remain in the conscious mind will reach and influence the subconscious mind through the law of autosuggestion or repetition. So running our mental movie over and over again is going to have the effect of allowing us to wake up one morning and wake up in our dream or wake up in our movie and experience that in our lives. So in closing, our original questions. What is a miracle? It's our belief backed by faith and our feeling. How do we seek miracles in our life? By seeing and feeling our desired result in life. And why do some people seem to always get their prayers answered? It's because they become accustomed to believing in themselves. And how can we experience more miracles in our lives? By seeing our lives as we want them in our minds each and every day. We are the miracle. We create the miracle. We, in fact, are the divine agency that brings these miracles into our life. And so ends the lesson.